This isn't Coyote Pass. There are no sweeping mountain vistas. There is no grand vision. There is no mention of a forever family on a forever property. This is the end of the line we watched for years as self-styled King Kody Brown bossed around his sprawling family, relocating them from state to state, mansion to mansion, in search of a dream that, as we now know, was nothing more than a mirage. What you are witnessing, crew, is what our sources are referring to as the last chapter. The ultimate embarrassment for a king and his queen was Great Kingdom has fallen into dust. This is rock bottom. This is the tale of how Kody and Robyn Brown lost it all. And we've got the exclusive inside scoop you won't find anywhere else. What became of the $1 million home? Where did all the money vanish? And how did they wind up here, in a borrowed trailer on the edge of nowhere? We've been digging, speaking to those on the periphery, and piecing together a timeline of a collapse months, if not years, in the making. This is the story Tolk refuses to show you. Before we get to the jaw-dropping facts of their collapse, if you've been with me on this epic for years, and are ready to hear the truth, take a moment to tap that like button. And if you are new here, or haven't yet subscribed to Reality, recap and ring the bell. We're your one-stop destination for in-depth divs and insider theories that take the show further. You won't want to miss one single update on this developing story now. In order to get an idea of how they wound up in that double-wide, we have to go back about 8 months. The assets of Tristan, then Janelle, and lastly, Meri, weren't only emotional body blows to Kody. They were a financial Armageddon. The family's income was for years a fragile ecosystem, one supported mostly by the Tolk paycheck shared among the 4 waves, with 3 of those income streams lost. The entire financial weight of Kody, Robyn, and their 5 kids fell squarely on their backs. We all wondered, we all guessed, how could they possibly pay for the mortgage on that ginormous house, the property tastes, utilities, Robyn's shopping sprees, and Kody's hobbies and truck loaf? From our sources, the answer is easy. Shunnodui, ektoy. They couldn't, not even close. But Kody, being the patriarch that he is, had a solution, a catastrophic, ego-based solution that would end up being the last nail in their financial coffin. Sources once privy to the Brown family's business affairs have recounted Kody's last gasp attempt at being a financial sage. He reportedly invested what little money they had left in a company known as Patriarch Prime Principles. It was marketed as an online subscription-based service, a blend of courses, and one-on-one coaching for men who, in Kody's phrase, were looking to take back their masculine throne and rule their households with unshakable authority. Imagine it as some sort of multi-level, marketing meets, self-help, built around Kody's specific ideology of leadership and family. Tens of thousands were said to have been spent on web developers, video production for classes, and online marketing. Kody dreamed of being the next Tony Robbins, a giant, a man of men, an industry insider-related, Mel. He was fixated, always discussing revenue streams and scalable models. He believed with all his heart, thousands of men would be willing to pay, nigh a month to learn his secrets, and he ignored everyone who cautioned him. It was a bad idea. The payoff and utter failure. The very demographic he courted. Conservative traditional men. Shunnotin, Tinnoi, were said to have been alienated by his public persona from the show. They didn't recognize a king. They recognized a man who had notoriously lost control of 3 waves. The irony lost to Kody, but not to the marketplace. Sources suggest the Wall Patriarch Prime project brought in less than bahts, shunno over its first half year on at shunno investment. As Kody was wasting their money on his ego venture, the other half of the picture wasn't much brighter. Robyn's sources, close to the family then reported, was in complete financial denial. One insider, who asked not to be named, spoke of a steady trickle of packages to the Flagstaff house, designer clothing for the children, high-priced home furnishings, new technology, anything to keep up appearance. Kody would hold tense meetings in his office about his failing business, while Robyn in another room spent money they didn't have. Piecing together the reports, our theory is this. Robyn, terrified of regressing to the poverty she experienced before marrying Kody, fell into profound denial. She had her dream life, her monogamous marriage, masquerading as polygamy, a devoted husband, and all the material comforts she desired. The other wife's assets were liable to destroy Robyn's illusion. In her head, if they just kept pretending they were rich, then they must be. But this was a risky psychological game with real cash. It made for a perfect storm on one hand. You've got Kody's narcissism. His complete refusal to acknowledge Patriarch Prime was in trouble. So he just doubled down, injecting more money into a failing project. On the other hand, Robyn's abiding fear of insecurity prompted her to go on a shopping binge, frantically holding on to the facade of money and security. They were together a runaway train of debt. The first warning sign, according to public records we uncovered, came in the form of a second mortgage on the house. It likely covered the initial investment in Kody's business and paid down some mounting credit card debt, but it was merely a temporary fix, a band-aid on a widening financial wound within a year. Payments were missed. First one, then two. The bank's warning letters, or sources say Kody hid them from Robyn, grew increasingly threatening. Kody still thought Patriarch Prime would make it. He just needed more time, a little more money. He attempted to borrow money from friends and even contacted members of their former church, but his credibility got ahead of him. No one would touch it. The knockout came on a Tuesday morning early one spring. A day that insiders say started like any other. Kody sat in his office, supposedly working on editing on a meandering new motivational video, and Robyn assisting Ariella with homework. Then the knock came at the door. It wasn't a neighbor visiting. It was the county sheriff delivering the official notice of foreclosure. They had now 90 days to leave the property. The illusion was shattered. The fantasy was ended. The situation rapidly deteriorated to one of outrage and a screaming spat heard down the block. Robyn screamed at Kody that he had been deceiving her. Kody, furious and embarrassed, accused the Og Three Waves. They had betrayed him. He cried out in rage. Shunnotsoi, Batsar. Their public shaming had ruined his reputation. That it was all their doing. He took no blame, none. The following 90 days were spent in a haze of shame and panic. Shunnoshat, Shunnotin. They didn't have funds for a rental deposit and their credit was, for the sake of tact, destroyed. The foreclosure was a mark against them that made them unwelcome in Flagstaff rentals. They were financial outcasts. They couldn't even get movers. Sources indicate that Kody and Robyn were forced to call on a handful of loyal friends remaining from their church, as well as some family members of Robyn's to assist with packing. The ordeal was unbearable. A source was there likened the scene to being surreal. The massive house was filled with upscale belongings. And Robyn utterly broke down over her porcelain dolls and precious moments, collectible figurines. She wept, exclaiming, "These are my memories. This is all I have." But in the meantime, Kody would be gone for hours, holed up in his truck and staring off into space. Then he would come back, furious, dumping things into boats, smashing things. The kids were afraid, staying barricaded in their bedrooms. This is an important moment, crew. Look at the move from Vegas to Flagstaff. A huge, crazy operation. Yeah, but it was a family affair. The older children were involved, the wives contributed, all of them working together despite tension. This time, there was only Kody, Robyn, a few unwilling assistants, and 5 frightened children. Kody's support system that he had spent his life establishing and destroying was lost, and he felt its loss in the most immediate way. With days to go before being evicted and each rental application rejected, they were out of choice. No savings, Kody's company, a dipped sinkhole. They could no longer afford to live in Flagstaff, the city they had brought the Wolf family to just a few years ago. It was up to Robyn to make the call. People familiar with the situation say it was the most embarrassing call of her life. She had to call a far-off cousin, Darlin, whom she hadn't talked to in almost 20 years. Cousin Darlin was in a rural area of northern Arizona, some 3 hours outside of Flagstaff, and had a property with an old, abandoned double-wide trailer, a former home for her aging father, now in disrepair, forgotten, and most importantly, available. The call, according to a description by someone who was on the call, was strained. Darlin did not care for Kody. She had seen the show and, like many fans, had an opinion. She would allow them to lease the trailer, but under strict terms, cash rent every first of the month, no exceptions. The lease would be month to month, and Darlin explained. It wasn't a handout. This was purely a business transaction. Don't get me in trouble, she cautioned. And so, the king and queen were banished, not to a palace, not to a new palace, but to a double-wide trailer belonging to a dubious relative. The moving truck, a rented U-Haul driven by Kody himself, was packed full of their old life. The pricey leather sofas didn't fit. The large dining room table was sold for pennies on Facebook Marketplace. Much of their stuff had to be stored in a cheap storage unit, another monthly bill they could hardly afford. Shunno. They pulled in late at night. The headlights of the U-Haul sliced through the night, illuminating the sagging, downcast trailer, that would be their new home. Our informant reported on the children's initial response, complete silence. The normally chatty, rambunctious children of Robyn and Brown stood petrified. Aurora, who was naturally anxious, seemed on the cusp of a full-blown panic attack. Dayton, the taciturn one, just stared, his face a frozen mask. Solomon and Ariella, still too young to truly understand the catastrophe, were bewildered, wanting to know from their mom where their actual house was. And what about Robyn? Ekshunno, Charat. Our source says she didn't exit the truck for a solid 20 minutes. She was in the passenger seat, weeping uncontrollably, saying over and over, "This wasn't the deal, Kody. This wasn't the deal." The first week in the trailer was, according to all reports, hell on earth. The small space was a pressure cooker for a family accustomed to a char shuna square foot house. The 5 children shared 2 tiny bedrooms. Kody and Robyn's bedroom was barely large enough for their bed. The walls were paper-thin. Every cow, whisper, or exasperated sigh was heard throughout the trailer. The pipes were defective. The hot water was adjusted after one brief shower. The air conditioner was ancient and barely working, a cruel joke in the heat of Arizona. The kitchen itself was a tight gully. With fading, peeling linoleum floors and acne at shunas laminate countertops, to Robyn, a woman who valued her spotless kitchen, big pantry, and room to entertain. This was a nightmare on a personal level. She now had to cook on a stuttering electric stovetop in an area smaller than her previous wall. In closet, arguments were relentless and vicious, not the television. Movie philosophical arguments about family culture, but harsh, nasty battles of 2 adults in a bad dream of their own creation. They bickered over money, room, the kids' noise, and even was turn it was to jiggle the perpetually running toilet handle. Kody, divorced of his big house and prestige, was a ghost in his own life. He would sit for hours on the tin steps, which had a rusty patina gazing at the ground. His empire had collapsed to a agduishuna square a foot tin shed on a desert lot. No longer the patriarch of a sprawling family, he was a broke middle-aged man in a trailer. The psychic shock of this reduction, or there he holds, was something he was entirely unready for. His sense of self was all about being the great Kody Brown, and now that was taken away from him. At the same time, as all this tragedy was playing out in one corner of Arizona, something entirely different was playing out elsewhere. And it is this contrast, the radical divergence of fortunes, that makes this narrative so engrossing. As Kody and Robyn crashed and burned, the Og wives, Tristan, Janelle, and Meri, were emerging from the ashes, the bombshell news that shook the sister wives' world. The 3 founding waves, now finally free from Kody's grasp, created their own media empire. Our sources reveal the name, Sisterhood Rising Media. More than a tittle, it was a manifesto. For the first time ever, they were getting control of their own story, careers, and financial destinies, their debut. A tell-all memoir was anticipated big.